Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and tonight we're going to talk about tropical troubles. And we're heading towards the peak of the hurricane season, which is September the 10th on average. That's a climatological maximum or peak time of year for tropical activity across the Atlantic Ocean. So let's get right to the overview of what's going on. We're going to start off with the Atlantic Wide View satellite here. This is valid time 7:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the 31st of August 2017. All right, so what are the main features going on right now across the Atlantic? We have Hurricane Irma right here. Here's Hurricane Irma, and then we do have a frontal system in the tropics. We do have a couple other scattered areas of convection. By the way, these oranges and these reds and these yellows, those indicate where the cloud tops are the coldest or the highest. Those clouds are building very tall in those areas. So what we're really going to zoom in on is Irma, and we're definitely going to look at the overview from the National Hurricane Center. Now this is the 5-day tropical overview of what's going on out there. So we have Irma basically to the west of the Cabo Verde Islands, which is these little islands here. And then to the south of that, coming off the African coast, there's another tropical wave that has a potential for development in the 5-day period. And then we have the remnants of the devastating storm known as Harvey. Just an amazing, incredible amount of rainfall there in the Houston, Texas area. And that remnant is now over northwestern Mississippi and is still producing a lot of rain, by the way, across the eastern United States, those remnants. And then over in the Bay of Campeche, there's an area that has a 20% chance of development. Right now, it doesn't look like it's going to develop, but we'll keep an eye on that. The main focus of this presentation is going to really be on Hurricane Irma. So this is the latest bulletin from the National Hurricane Center out of Miami, Florida. As of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, which is pretty much the same as Eastern Daylight Time. What we have is the center's at 17.3 north, or 34.8 west. It's about 720 miles, actually 1,780 miles east of the Leeward Islands, with maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. This is a very dangerous Category 3 storm already. The present movement is to the west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, and the central pressure is already down to 967 millibars, or 28.56 inches. And just to put it in perspective, the average barometric pressure, the standard barometric pressure, is actually basically 29.92 inches, or basically it's 1,013 millibars. So this is well below that. Looking at the infrared satellite imagery, the reds indicate the coldest cloud tops. The lighter blues are the lower clouds. And right now, just in the presentation characteristics of Irma, it has got its act together and is already a powerful Category 3 storm. The central area here is known as the eye, and that's the calmest area of the storm, and it's already showing up. And you see this red ring here, that is the actual eye wall. And typically with powerful hurricanes, what happens is they go through eye wall replacement cycles in which the eye wall surrounding the eye will actually expand in size. And as it intensifies, it will start shrinking or contracting in size, this eye wall. And right now, looking at the discussion from the Hurricane Center, they were indicating that it's starting to go through another eye wall replacement cycle. All right, so what are the factors for intensification for Irma? All right, what we typically look for in the tropics is we look for water temperatures that are generally 79 degrees Fahrenheit, which is generally right around basically 25 degrees Celsius to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So these values here in the tropical Atlantic right now are plenty warm enough to support tropical development. You want a 25 degree Celsius temperature or higher. So that's the first requirement for intensification. You got to have that warmth and heat from the ocean surface for that hurricane to tap into. And typically this time of year, our sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic are about to reach their peak value. Also, what you want is an area of low wind shear. When you have low wind shear, basically as the thunderstorms grow, as a tropical cyclone grows, those thunderstorm tops will not be sheared or ripped apart over the top. If you have very strong winds or strong wind shear over the storm, it will rip the tops off those thunderstorms, and it will be unfavorable for intensification. So what are we looking at here at the present time? This is Irma here, surrounded by these green lines. Now, each one of these lines represents a wind speed, 5-knot intervals. So around Irma right now is a very relaxed shear environment. Anywhere where you see the green circular areas here, all right, that indicates an area that is favorable, very low or light winds. So minimal wind shear. Anything in yellow, that indicates a neutral area for wind shear. And then anything in red, which we typically have up the mid latitudes where the winds are much stronger from west to east, those are areas, these red areas are areas where it's unfavorable based on stronger wind shear. So out ahead of Irma, you really have an area of green as it remains in this belt within the tropical easterlies. So we don't have any strong winds blowing to rip the storm apart. Now this is Irma's official forecast track. As of 5 p.m. this evening, this is the location of the center of the storm. And the M here represents major hurricane status, which means a Category 3 or stronger storm. It's already a Category 3, so it's already reached this major category status. So this is the path, the official track from the National Hurricane Center, showing Irma going west and then slightly southwest, and just to the east, of the Leeward Islands as we get towards Monday, Labor Day, and then eventually into Tuesday, even 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So this is the spaghetti models, and this is what you may see on TV from your TV weathermen. But this shows you the general tracks based on the 1800 Zulu GFS ensembles. Okay, so basically everybody's in agreement that this system is going, you see these lines close together, that means high confidence or greater agreement amongst the models. And then you'll notice over time how these lines get farther apart, and that is typically common with the forecast models. With time, there's more uncertainty. So there's a greater spread by the time we get out, further in the future, about 10 days out or so, there's a wider spread in the forecasts, okay, for the storm. So it's just something, we really have to keep a close eye on. It really depends on some factors, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Now, this is the Hurricane Irma, the intensity guidance based on the 18 Zulu GFS run. And it shows generally where these lines are is the greatest confidence when they're clustered together is the areas where it's the greatest confidence. And we're looking at a very strong Category 3 storm. There are a couple of the models indicated by these black lines indicating even a stronger storm, Cat 4, Cat 5. Here's your wind scale on the left. So you notice we're looking at a storm above 100 knots throughout the whole life cycle, all the way out to 132 hours with Irma. Again, this is a fairly intense system. Now let's look at the GFS forecast track with the model. This is 18Z. Here's Irma as we get towards Friday the 8th of September, actually the evening of the 7th. Here's Irma in its location of the East Coast as it moves northwest. This is next Friday evening, the 8th of September. So you notice how it's generally progressing. Very intense central pressure, 904 millibar pressure. That is a really strong system. And then as we go, now we're looking at Saturday evening at 8 p.m. local time, a 920 millibar hurricane right off the mid-Atlantic coast. And then this is a little bit further in the future, out 234 hours to the morning of Sunday, September 10th. It's all the way up into Maine. And so this is the GFS, American GFS model track. Starting off here, progressing northwest, very intense storm at 904 millibars, and then 920 millibars right off the mid-Atlantic coast, starting to skirt the coast and then head due north into the Gulf of Maine at 944 millibars by Sunday morning, the 10th of September. One thing I want to note that I'm not showing you, the European model forecast has been consistently much farther south, generally through the Key West area, staying well south of just north here of the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico as it makes its transit. The European model has it going into the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 4 system. So, there's a big difference. There's a big spread. We talk about the uncertainty right here between the models over time as these lines get farther apart. We also have to look at the European model, the different models, right? So my final thoughts tonight for Irma. All right, Irma is a very powerful hurricane that will need to be watched closely. This is a type of storm that, based on its intensity, forecast alone, could really, if it were to hit land, would be very catastrophic type damage. Now there's two trains of thought right now. Either Irma will continue west-northwest on the southern periphery, or basically the southern side of a stronger, this is subtropical high. There's a stronger subtropical high over here. You can't really see it on the forecast, but these lines here is the backside of that high. So will the storm basically follow on the southern periphery of a stronger subtropical ridge or high, or will the high weaken and then move further east, allowing for recurvature over the western Atlantic as the GFS model is showing? So that's really the thoughts right now. Either this hurricane, very intense hurricane, is going to go into the Gulf of Mexico, or it's going to recurve back to the north over the western Atlantic Ocean. So again, we have to watch this very, very carefully. And then, this is the 13th of September. This is the afternoon of the 13th of September. There is, if we go back, this system right here coming off the African coast could very well be right on the heels of Irma and form into Hurricane Jose. So, we got two possible threats to United States territory from the tropics, from the low latitudes, over the next 14 days. So we really got to keep an eye on things. Just as a reminder, the climatological peak of hurricane season is actually September the 10th. So we're about 11 days out from that, from today's date. So everything is working in favor for Irma. Just keep in mind, keep us tuned here to Spot On Weather for the latest updates and forecasts. Of course, always look at your National Hurricane Center forecasts down there. You go to nhc.noaa.gov. They have great insight in their discussions and their advisories. So make sure you're following their particular tracks as well. Right now, just too far out in the Atlantic to do any kind of Hurricane Hunter type missions. But this is something we got to keep an eye on down the road. And that really wraps everything up tonight here at Spot On Weather, the tropical update. Remember, we're Spot On Weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing it right. Have a great evening, everybody.